Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Reveal Report. I'm your host, George Iceman, and I welcome you to the very first episode of 2023. It's a new year. It's a new time. We should be happy and we should be joyful because great things are going to happen in this time. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that icon bell because that'll notify you when the show begins or if we post a video. 2022 was amazing. And I like to think that we brought a lot of topics to the forefront and we had some guests and we talked about some things. But I do feel that it was a higher up class, like a higher, maybe high school or maybe university of some sort, or it wasn't the pinnacle or how deep we could go. So I planned on making this year very, very deep. Let's use that word. We're going to go deep, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go deep into the world of the esoteric, deep into the world of the occult. We're going to share a lot of information between myself and others that have done tons of research, reading, and have dabbled in, and I shouldn't say dabbled, but have really spent a lot of time in dedicating their lives into finding the truth about humanity, where we are, what we're doing, the history of the world, the Bible, and so many other things. So this is going to be a very interesting show. You'll have to watch it a few times, I think, because we're going to come out with some very interesting things. This will be, I would say, like a Harvard or degree or Stanford type of show because there's a lot into it. And some of you might not understand if you're new here, and you'll have to go back and watch other episodes to catch up. But for those that have been with us, following us, and are on the same wavelength, thank you for being here. Get ready. Again, ladies and gentlemen, just a reminder, please subscribe if you want to participate in the chat. It's for subscribers only. And for those that have any ill will or anything negative to say, just be aware that you will be deleted and banned from the platform. Keep it positive, and we thank you all for being here, and happy New Year. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring my co-host and author, Miss Jessie Czebotar. Jessie, how are you?
Hey, great. Good to be here, George.
Thanks for being here. And also joining us is another astute guest, very knowledgeable, very educated. He has vast knowledge, especially biblically, but he doesn't just go by that book. He'll go into other books and old texts that'll talk about those bloodlines and things. He's very, very well read, and it's always a pleasure and an honor to have him. Please welcome author Gary Wayne. Gary, how are you?
Doing very well, and so happy to be here with you so early in the new year, and very much looking to the show and the discussion. I think from the topics of the advertising for the show, it's going to be a dynamite show. So I think people should pull up a chair and hang on to their hats.
100%. Without further ado, the topic today is priests and their garments. And some people might think, well, what does that mean? Priests and their garments. Well, everything we've been talking about for the past few years is about hidden knowledge and hidden symbolism, because everything represents everything. And one of the first things biblically that we'll even talk specifically about this is when Moses is talking to the Lord and he is instructed on who the priesthood would be and who would enter the tabernacle and who would wear these chest plates, key here, and who would be in charge of the instruments and who would come into the room with the Ark of the Covenant. And I thought this was fascinating because we should touch on that. We should get into it. And there's many pictures that kind of show you what we're talking about. So I want to start off first, but it would look like a high priest would kind of look like this. Kind of this type of ensemble. Notice that plate, the headgear, the belt, meaning for everything. I'll show you another one, but it'll explain a little bit here. There are 8 pieces. There's the turban, the crown, the breastplate, the ephod, the belt, the robe, the tunic, and the pants. Of course, they didn't mention the flip-flops or the slippers or that you would use, but this is just the basic of the high priest garments that they would wear to do what they do and take care of their responsibilities. But the main reason I touched on it is because it all goes back to this story first, which is the Ark of the Covenant. And there was only a chosen few allowed to be in that room. And they had to wear certain outfits and they had to wear chest plates. Here's what one of them looks like, the priest, and they had this. Now, I'm not saying this is the specific chest plate, but that's one as an example that goes back a very long time. Now, as you can see, there's 12 stones. There could be meaning to that and colors, and we're going to get into that. But the priests, their garments, their chest plates. I'll begin with Gary. Gary, from what you've researched, from what you studied, what would be the purpose of them wearing these outfits and those chest plates?
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. So this is a special priesthood within a nation of priests. And it's exactly one of the purposes that Israel was created, was to be a nation of priests. But out of that, you're going to have a bloodline priesthood of Levite priests. And this is a succession and sort of an inherited priesthood as you go back into further history. And I think in the last show, we talked a little bit about Melchizedek. And so this is sort of a succession in that succession chain of the Melchizedek order to come. And there was an even more ancient priesthood that was before humankind was created. There was a priesthood that was amongst the angelic realm that had a high priest that would be set before God. And this high priest was Satan. And for people who aren't sort of up to speed on this, then I would suggest you go back. I think it was the December show when we talked about Melchizedek, and learn a little bit more about that. But Satan was thought to have been the first priest. And when he fell, he lost that priesthood and it's vacant. And so you have an intermittent order of priests of the Levites that Jesus will take over once he takes power. So the reason why I bring that up is it goes to sort of the heart of so many things in the Bible and what all of the events are about. And it's all about, with terms of the creation of the Adamites, is the resolution to the angelic rebellion. Now, what's interesting with Satan, as talked about in Ezekiel 28, is that these stones are 9 of the same stones that Satan was provided. So you had sardius, topaz, diamond, beryl, onyx, jasper, sapphire, carbuncle, and emerald were the 9 that were given to to Satan, that's recorded in the book of Ezekiel chapter 28. So as a higher priesthood, in terms of what its destiny is going to be, in terms of being headed by the future Melchizedek order, Jesus, as when he comes back for his visitations and sets up the millennium, they are a higher succeeding priesthood that's going to be partnered with that down the road. So they're given in the meantime 12 stones, and they have 9 of the same stones, and the 3 that are different that are listed in the Bible are the Ligure stone. It's thought to be maybe a jacinth type of stone, although it's not real clear what it might be today. You also have agate, and that is kind of a reddish brown type of stone, and you have a amethyst. So those are the 3 additional ones. So what it is it's adding to the prominence of this priesthood and what its destiny is going to be from the original one that Satan had. And so why would you have these jewels in the first place? Well, they would probably all have special meaning, but one of the things that comes out is that they are worn in terms of part of the clothing of the priesthood with the Urim and the Thummim. And the Urim kind of means lights, or shining lights, and also it's jewels. And so the jewels of the Urim, which are part of the vest, the breastplate that he's wearing, that the priest wore, were to determine God's decisions. And then the other stones are the Tumen, and these are also precious stones, but they're to determine the outcome of a sacred lot. So you can imagine that you would have in ancient history pebbles being pulled out of a container. Well, this would be something similar, but it would, I guess, decide by whatever stone was taken or shone or whatever would be decided as to the outcome of that sacred lot. But here's this really interesting thing is that these stones were used to communicate with God in conjunction with the Ark of the Covenant. So that has some real interesting implications. And we know not only from the details of constructing the priesthood, constructing the Ark of the Covenant, but also we also have verses in the Bible, like say in 1 Samuel 28, where God was no longer going to answer Saul through the Urim and the Thummim. And in Numbers 27:21 as one other example, is Eleazar was asking for counsel from the Urim. So there's a communication that goes into another dimension. Like this is going directly to heaven,
100%.
communicating with the God. And it's also, as we'll probably get down into the ark in a little bit later, it's also kind of like a dwelling place for Yahweh to come, Yahweh of the Elohim, to come and interact in a spiritual way, in a spirit way, with the people of Israel. So these jewels have significant importance and significant power. I mean, we don't have a technology today that I'm aware of where we can just communicate into another dimension and instantaneously. So that's just sort of the quick sort of discussion in terms of the jewels and the importance. And so one might expect there might be more jewels attached to the priesthood in the final succession when the millennium comes.
Jessie, what are your thoughts? You want to touch on that?
Yeah, some very interesting things I'll share from the higher level knowledge in the occult, but some of their stories also go that the 12 stones are special stones that were taken out of, in scriptures, I believe it talks about that Satan walked among the fiery stones. So there's a concept that those were part of those stones taken out of there that actually contain the glory of God himself in conjunction with the names of those that he's called. They further get into that where the stones are really used in magic, especially with the higher levels, which do call themselves the Order of Melchizedek. And in one of their high reflection books, Initiates of the Flame, I believe it's around page 68, 69, they actually give the detailed story of when Lucifer was cast out of heaven and claimed that it was the Archangel Michael who knocked the stones out of the breastplate. And they do confirm that his stone, the main one in his breastplate, was the emerald one, and claimed that then fell to heaven. Ironically, they also claimed that stone, the place where it fell then, is right where we have the item in Iraq that's known as the Black Cube in
The Ben stone.
Muslim faith. Yeah, so it gets kind of very interesting with some of their elements to that. But you do see, there's other, or let me think how to put it. One of the most interesting passages about it is Psalm 140 or 133, where it talks about the unity of the brethren and that the oil, there was a connecting piece between the anointing oil and the oil of the brethren that would be poured over the priest's head that represented the harmony, the voice, the song of all the sons of Israel together. So some of that, the occult gets into the songs that the jewels, the rocks sing, And it is believed, every stone carries a different reflection. So at the higher levels, they use that for dimensional access. That could include up into the higher heavenly realms or the lower realms. So it gets interesting when you think about, what were these priests able to do in their service to God? And you see how easy it was even for individuals like Solomon, who then began to take these things and incorporate it into rings or things that would be worn among the occultists in order to engage in interdimensional and spiritual travels.
It's unbelievable information. It's important everyone take a good listen, because this is the real deal, and it comes from ancient texts and writings. And I'll share that what I was taught from these chest plates is how to communicate with higher beings. Yes, to communicate with God, but on the other plane, these priests would use that to communicate with spiritual beings. Now, who are these spiritual beings? Are they angels? Are they demons? Who were they, and why specifically did you have to wear that in that brotherhood that would say that you're a high priest, that you're part of that bloodline, which I'm going to touch on because I think that's key. We've always heard it's in the blood. It's in the blood. And some people might not know, what does that mean? It's in the blood. Well, it's usually the bloodline and where those ancestors come from. So these chest plates have always been used occultically to summon, to communicate in higher dimensions and higher levels. So is there a value to these today? 100%, especially on the black market, ladies and gentlemen. This is a massive thing to have. Jesse made reference that some of these stones may have been used in the Solomon times for rings and to show who's who and what's what. Let's go back a moment on the bloodline, because we always hear it's in the blood. Now, in that time, again, we're going back to the Ark of the Covenant. Not anybody was allowed in. It was only Aaron, who was the priest, and his sons were also, with him. And he had, the Lord asked the other tribe that would take care of the utensils, that would clean, that would do so forth and so forth. But it was only Aaron and his family that were going in to do certain things. This is a very, I know, Gary, you're going to love this, and Jess, you're going to like this. This is very interesting because it's not a small, that's what it is. This is a very long situation that we're going to get into, because at the end, the question is, where is his bloodline today? But before we get there, I want to go to Gary. Gary, thoughts? Aaron, his bloodline, chosen to be the priesthood. Touch on that, please, if you can.
Sure. And so the other thing I wanted to just quickly talk about in terms of that breastplate and you had shown the pictures, and just so to give people an idea that may not be quite identical, but it's reasonably accurate. So the clothing that they were instructed to wear, was gold, blue, purple, and scarlet, but more of a twine, more of a linen. So more of a tartan type of garment. So, and I think that these colors would have been chosen and intertwined for a purpose. And there was also 2 rings of gold on the ends, on 2 sides of the breastplate. And there was also 2, what King James Version Bible says, ouches, which is basically a checkered type of support for various kinds of jewels, and also a great wreathed or sort of woven like gold chain. And I think all of this was working. I think that the power that was coming through was so powerful that this was also protection. So not only a communication device, but also protection.
Protection, 100%. Correct. That was also said.
Yeah, so just thought I would throw that out. So this is very powerful technology.
Yeah, and that goes along with what you said too about God rendering a decision. The breastplate was distinctly connected to God's judgment against um, the people of Israel, and it was to be a reminder of his judgment to them at all times. So,
Yeah.
it's very interesting. If God was not pleased
Mhm.
as they went in, the priests had to wear bells and a rope around their foot
Yeah.
so they could pull him out if God was not pleased.
Exactly. Yes, there could be
Yeah,
very instantaneous ramifications. So that
yeah.
protection would not prevent the wrath of God, so to
Yeah.
speak, or the judgment of God. And so, yeah, the bloodline is so important to understand, not only from a monotheist perspective, but also is counterfeited by polytheism, because as we've talked about on many shows, they counterfeit everything.
Everything.
So just as there's a counterfeit Melchizedek order that was mentioned just a couple of minutes ago. So we need to sort of understand that. So this bloodline had members on the Sanhedrin, which was the high council. And that
Yes.
was around even to the time of Jesus. And so you had three main groups. There may have been smaller ones, but the main ones were essentially Pharisees, Sadducees, and the Essenes. And all had representatives on the Sanhedrin of that time. And all three groups were around at the destruction of the temple in the time of 70 AD, in the time of the Romans. And that this was a destruction of the southern kingdom that was made up of three tribes versus all of Israel, and the split away with the northern tribes of Israel in the north that were previously taken away into exile by the Assyrians and then dispersed around the world and lost until the end time. And so this bloodline is kept within the southern kingdom through the tribes that stay with Judah. Judah is one of the 12 tribes. Levi isn't counted as one because it's replaced through a process because they've been moved up to the priesthood. And you have Ephraim and Manasseh, sons of Joseph, that are going to step up and make up for the missing Levite tribe, and Joseph as well. So it's the two sons that represent the tribes. But in the southern kingdom, what's left is Judah, Simeon, and Levi. So you have the Levites that are still there. And so this bloodline priests would go anywhere the dispersed people of Judah would go after during the diaspora, and would be held very sacred and could not be lost. So they would be protecting this bloodline to however size the communities were, to whatever countries that they went, that you could have bloodline Levites that are still in place. I mean, I can't speak to whether or not that's been held completely true all the way through. They may have a lot of rabbis that are non-bloodlines, but I have to think at the higher council level,
Yes.
they would be represented from those original bloodlines. And not all of those three groups were monotheists. In fact, the Essenes were polytheists. They come out of the belief of the therapeutate out of Heliopolis, which is a very interesting thing when you get into the sort of medical symbols and things like that, in terms of that they believe that Moses brought the Egyptian religion with them, and so they were polytheists and they worshipped angels. I have a great document on this if people want it. I walk through the church fathers, Josephus, all the different references to the Essenes. I cover them off in detail in the book, but this really gets sort of specific to the sources so that people can understand the veracity of it. And the Sadducees and the Pharisees had different views on a lot of different things, on how literal you should be, the application, was there a resurrection, wasn't. They had a lot of different sort of splits. So when you have that happen, you wonder which was the more dominant part of the families that went with the diaspora. And we also know the Essenes were the dominant priesthood right at the end at the temple before it was overthrown by the Romans. And so whatever they took with them would have been probably consequential in terms of that prominence of that line. And I think they would have represented the Kabbalistic and then the sort of the Egyptian side. So when you get into the secret societies, like let's say the Rosicrucians, they have
Yes.
very much a Kabbalistic, but a Egyptian sort of slant to it. The Kabbalist form doesn't really come along into Israel or into southern kingdom of Israel, Judah, until the time of the Babylonian exile. That's when you start to get all the Lilith sort of mythos and things sort of coming in. So you got those two different ends, and you got many different groups of polytheists within the southern kingdom at the time of Jesus. So there's many of those groups, but the Essenes are the most dominant. So we see so much polytheist influence in Judaism today that one might think that it is the mystical aspect that took the dominant role after the diaspora.
Just before you tap in, again, this is very interesting. We're touching on the bloodline, the brotherhood. What he said, what Gary said specifically, of course, is yes, maybe not all those bloodlines may be in certain positions, but definitely the higher you go of the highest. He made reference to the Sanhedrin. There's the Chabad and many others that are very high up. That is grandfathered in. You're not a new person coming and you've been searching and reading and they're just going to let you in the door. That is passed on generationally to get in that door. Would you not say that? And the highest levels.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes.
And now Aaron was known as an occultist. If you were to go back in that time, he knew the art of the priesthood, especially from the Egyptians. He knew the art of making false idols. He knew the gold. He knew the incense. He knew all of that. In fact,
as did Moses.
As did Moses, exactly. And they did that. Of course, he went and he did that at the mountain when the Lord was speaking to Moses, the 10 Commandments. They created this calf of gold. So he was very familiar with this. So now he's got the responsibility. Here he is. Here's my question. Do you believe, whether it be Jesse or Gary, that Aaron, his bloodline, whether it's through his wife or so forth, exists in this generation and is involved in some ancient group that is very high up?
I do. I talked about that. I believe that, God's word has height, depth, breadth, and width. And one of the things about the Levitical bloodline that Aaron stemmed from is that it fits into God's time frame of seasons, harvests, fruits that were to be born by the sons as the Lord called them to tend, basically, and steward in ruling and reigning with him. And I believe that Levitical priesthood was specifically set up as a priesthood to assemble and gather in those who would rule and reign with the Lord. One of the ironic things is, as you look at that, everything lines up in God's word, the way he orchestrated it with his time for seasons and events. As we look at the calendar of fruits, we see that third month was for the harvest of wheat as well as the harvest of figs. And the figs is one of the few that has a double harvest where there's two crops that are harvested. And so it's interesting that the first time that we see the figs is with the gathering of the wheat, which was used for bread. The second time is later in the fall when the figs are gathered with the grapes. So it's interesting that you've got that connection with the priesthood and the figs and the gathering both with the wheat, the bread, and the wine, which we know, that's one of the commissions that the Lord gave to the priesthood, is that they would serve the bread and the wine. So it gets very interesting as we further into this discussion.
And
So, yeah, I would agree as well that
Mhm.
bloodline priesthood is in place,
Yes.
and there may be rivals to it, but we need to be,
Mhm.
particularly if we're in the fig tree generation, speaking
Mhm.
as how fig trees were brought up, then it's very important that we understand some of this information, just as the wheat and the tares and the grapes and the wine press are all interwoven throughout
Judgment.
the Bible as part of end time prophecy and things coming together. So it's important to understand some of those details. And so
Mhm.
I would say that the Jewish people, whether or not they're ever an Essene sort of belief or a Sadducees or a Pharisees, they all believed that there was a time when they had to prepare for the third temple in their belief, and they would ensure the bloodline, and they would ensure that whatever they were going to need to recreate what was required in terms of the sacrifices that will be delivered to them in the first 3.5 years in the covenant of death in Daniel 9:27,
Mhm.
um, negotiated by Antichrist, when they can do those sacrifices again in the temple, will all be in place. So either how to recreate it, or want things that were um, saved for that period. And just as important to all of that is that the requirement required the bloodline of Aaron to be in place to do it proper. So whatever belief system they're coming from, they would all agree on that. And so they would need to have kept that in place. And that would be kept at a very high level for sure, because that's the only way you can protect that bloodline, right? It's the only
Mhm.
way. And what's interesting about Moses, although Moses, he came from being a polytheist, right, into a
Yeah.
monotheist,
Yes.
but when we look at what the Israelites did with the calf that Jesse was talking about, is they were fully fluent in the bull cult, in the polytheist
Hmm.
religion of Egypt. And Moses was a step higher, though, in that, because he would have been initiated
Mm.
as a pureblood royale,
Interesting.
because he was accepted as such, even though he was
Hmm.
Israelite. He was educated at Heliopolis, sworn the oaths, and become an adept, which is how he was able to talk to the king and deal with the priests at the
Mm.
time, and do everything
Hmm.
sort of in a way that they totally understood what sort of authority he was holding when he came back. But everybody's accountable to their oaths, right? And so oaths are part of the sort of counterfeit side, and we're told not to swear oaths. And so
Hmm.
Moses was held accountable to those oaths as well, even though God reclaimed him, so that when he died, Satan went to buy his legal right to claim Moses, but
Hmm.
God sent Michael and said, no, 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 no. I'm vetoing that.
It's unbelievable. And I mean, this is a rabbit hole that we could go down in so many
Hmm.
different directions. But there's a few more things we want to touch on. And let's fast forward a little bit, guys. Let's fast forward to today's day and age and today's priesthood, especially the Catholic priesthood in the Vatican. And this is the specific imagery you'd see the Pope with the priests. Here he is. Look at that. He's got his gold garment. He's got his wonderful hat and his cross. But that cross, I'm very familiar with that cross. And
Right.
I could tell you before we get into it that that is not a cross of what people think it is, because again, they're not told what that is. But take a look at that cross very carefully. You both know what that is, but for the audience of everyone who's watching, that's not what you think it is, and it's not just a pretty design. And I think that looks nice. We'll just put that there. But this looks quite similar to this, and let me show you this picture. Oh yes, very similar. In fact, it is the same, and some people depict it, thicker or smaller, but that is the basic logo of a particular secret group that you know became very popular, not only for defending the realm, but lending money, ladies and gentlemen. They would lend money knowing you couldn't pay and then come collect what you owned. We'll get into that. So, the new garments that they're wearing in the priesthood, we'll begin with that because there's a lot to dissect. Do you?
I don't think it looks like biblically approved linen.
No,
I'm
no.
just saying, and it's definitely not blue and red and
Mhm.
white intertwined, or gold intertwined, but
Yeah. Well, and the cross that you're referring to is the
Yes.
Maltese cross.
Yes.
That's also the ancient Sumerian cross.
Let's get into it, Gary. Talk to us about what is this cross what is this you're talking about?
Well, this is a cross that comes out of the Anunnaki. This
There
is a
we go.
cross that comes
Very good.
out of
did
the.
you just say a giant's name?
Did I just say a giant's
A
name?
tribe of giants, right?
Well, yeah. There's two kinds. You have the Anunnaki of heaven, and you have the Anunnaki of earth. It says you have the Titans of heaven, the Titans of the earth, or the Nephilim in the Bible, or the Nephilim. They are the fallen angels at the top, which are the invisible ones that produce their spurious offspring, which are the giants. They're both called watchers in Sumerian mythology, and they may come from different watcher groups. And there are 4 groups of watchers, as we've talked. I think we've probably talked about in the past: cherubim, Ophanim, archangels, and seraphim. And so these are the sons of God that are described in the Bible, or watchers in the book of Enoch. And so these would be their offspring. And what's interesting about the polytheist religions is they produce bloodlines of spurious offspring, not just as heroes or warriors, as like the Templars are, but also the royal bloodlines for ruling. And also, and particularly with the cherubim branch of spurious offspring, they would also produce, but I think it's a commonality in the other watchers, particularly the seraphim as well, who are responsible for religion, but they produced a priest class. So whether or not it's with the Tengu that are in China, which would be sort of the eagle cherubim version, or it would be the Nagas in India, which would be the serpentine version, and the seraphim version, or if you're talking about the Hindus with the Brahmin from the Aryans, which would be the dark-haired one from the cherubim line as well, of a fallen angel, versus the red hair and blonde-haired ones that would be offspring and serpentine looking from the seraphim. So you've got different kinds of giants that are being created, but what's important is they created warriors, they created the kings, and they also created the priests for the religion, and it's all bloodline. So it's a complete counterfeit of what God had done through Adam, and then through Abraham, and then into Israel, and into Christianity. But it's interesting that you would have a Babylonian located symbolism that is starting to sort of be used as idolatry in the Roman Church, right? It's just and if it was just sort of that, you would just say, okay, well, somewhere down the line that was snuck in, but they should recognize, they know the history. The Vatican has the most knowledge next to the secret societies, and I'll leave it up to other people to decide who has more, but those are the 2 main sources of everything that's ever happened in the world, and they would know the history of that. It's on reliefs, for crying out loud.
Now Gary, you mentioned that Babylonian, and it's interesting. I'm glad that it was a great segue. Jesse, I'll let you comment on that as well before we get into that next part of his outfit. What do you want to say about this wonderful outfit he's wearing and this unbelievable cross here? It's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much symbology that's used, and even the things that they put on there, the special colors, the rings, the shape of the hat, and all of it goes beyond what God called for the priesthood, even to the staffs that they wear, and the priests that accompany the Pope or other individual. But I would propose something too. I would propose that at the highest levels that we do still have the Sanhedrin in charge of the Jesuit Catholic Church, and signifying that you still have Israel over Babylon and the other nations that are represented therein. So,
Well, and the Jesuits are the new Templars,
Correct. There you
yes.
go. Yeah.
right?
And that's
and in charge of banking.
and it's, guys, this is amazing. We can't hit that today, but we got to get into that. The new bankers, how the Templars used banking and used money, and I mean, it's 50 shows here we got, but
Yeah, I mean, there's so much,
there's
Go
50
ahead.
shows. But let's continue just with this little thing here. Here's another picture of this very interesting hat here, by the way, and it's kind of interesting. It's kind of like two eyes there. It's a design, I get it, but kind of looks like eyes. And when you look from the side view, and we're going to give it up right now here, folks. When we look from the side, then you'll start to understand that the religious Mitra hat is from Babylon. That's correct. And that the priest of ancient Dagon was fish worship. Dagon was an ancient god from Babylonian times. And I'll show you what he looks like. This is him, the Philistine god, because they used to worship him. And as you can see his garments and gear, why? And this could be a coincidence, of course. I'm just saying it could be a coincidence. But why would the hat of the highest priests of the land resemble that of the god Dagon?
Well, and the little swirl on the end of that
We haven't gotten there yet,
scepter.
Jesse. We're still not even on the scepter. We're just on the hat. Before I even throw it to both of you, I'm going to play a quick video that I found on the History Channel that even touches on this. So take a look. This is a little bit, just a quick snippet on Dagon.
The chief god of the Babylonians was called Dagon.
They have a god named Dagon, and it too is an amphibious human god.
The Babylonian god Dagon sounds eerily similar to the Dogon tribe, who claim they were visited by beings from Sirius B. Is that because the Dogon named themselves after the same god?
The ancient Babylonians had a god, half human, half fish, called Dagon. Is there a relationship between the Dogon and Dagon and the deity of the Babylonians that brought civilization to Earth? Absolutely, there could be a relationship.
The Babylonians worshipped Dagon in a temple called Emol, or the House of the Star. Could this be Sirius B? Did inhabitants of this distant star visit both the Dogon in Africa and the Babylonians in the Middle East and leave their name, perhaps Dag or Dog, embedded in both places?
Oh, there's so much here, but there's so much here with the worship and the House of the Star and so forth. But the ancient god, that Babylonian god, Dagon, which by the way, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see in that clip, other cultures, other places around the world also worshipped that particular god.
Mm-hmm.
So I find it interesting. And again, guys, you could correct me. I could have a wild imagination. I read too many books. That's the problem. That hat that he's wearing is so symbolic and so similar to the ancient worship of Dagon. And it's actually the resemblance of a fish head is what it is. They're worshiping a fish head is basically what that is. Please, I'll let Gary start. What's your thoughts on that, Gary? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
A lot of thoughts on that for sure. So when we look at what's going on here is that it's the superficial part, I guess, would say, is that even the Babylonian priests had miters or mitras that were shaped like the head of a fish. And so the question is what the heck is a pope doing with
Yes.
a Babylon? And keep in mind, for in the fig tree generation, we need to be looking for the new Babylon that's going to feature sort of some of this. Why is he wearing something that's distinctly polytheistic and part of a Middle East culture and maybe further around the world? Well, a couple of things to keep in mind is that that's the same as the Phrygian cap, right? And so the Phrygian and the Sibylline prophecies are prominent not only in the Greek, but also in Rome and the 7 hills of Rome. As recorded in terms of the 7 hills of Babylon in Revelation 17. And that the Palatine Hill was the hill of the Sibylline prophecies that actually came over to Rome from Greece. And so they had a branch worship site and temple, and the Sibylline prophecies are all part of that. So it's very much a prophetic, apocalyptic, polytheist type of religion. The branch location was just outside the walls of ancient Rome that had the 7 hills, and it wasn't, and this other hill wasn't inside Rome until about 800 AD, as I recall. And it's on Vatican Hill or Vaticanus Hill, which goes back to the Etruscan name for it. So it all goes back, and that's a hill of oracles and things like that. So you can see that sort of being part of the Roman culture. But again, you have to ask yourself, so why does that come up?
Yes.
It's the same kind of imagery that's around the world, but how does it sort of happen in the Roman Catholic Church? So if you go to the time of Constantine, in about 300 AD, shortly after 312 to 316, he is going to take over the Roman Empire as Caesar, but he's going to raise up Christianity to being the state-sponsored religion. He wants to do what was done, a couple hundred years before in Persia, where Zoroastrianism was the state empire. The state religion that united the empire. So what Constantine wanted to do, A, he wanted control, and then B, he wanted to be able to unite the empire and have absolute control. But he couldn't just overlay Christianity onto the whole kingdom, and it was in multiple countries with many different religions. And the most popular religion of that time was Mithraism. And Mithraism, I should say. And what's interesting about that is that you see much of that imagery coming into the Catholic religion, as well as some imagery that's borrowed from Egypt, let's say, with the images we get with Mary and the baby. That's all Isis and Horus sort of imagery that they adopt. So what he's doing is he's homogenizing the religion so that it's accepted by many different peoples. And they also changed the day of the Sabbath to the day of the Sunday to be the Sabbath, under the ruse that, well, Jesus was resurrected on the Sunday versus the commandments that says the seventh day is Saturday, right? And it can't change no matter what. So you have a lot of that type of thing that's going on, and that's the also mixing in with Sol Invictus, which is also a major part of the religion in the time of Rome. And this is all going in. So that's why you have December 25 as the birth date for Jesus, which is concocted, as opposed to September or October, depending on which historian you're talking to.
You got it. Exactly.
And that's because December 25 is the birth date of Mithra, the one who brings about the Mithraism religion. And Mithraism is a branch religion of Zoroastrianism of Persia and Babylon. And Zoroastrianism is the religion of the ancient Aryans that settled in Persia and also in the Indus Valley. These are the dark-haired version of
Okay.
the giants after,
Mhm.
before and after the flood. And this
Right.
is the same people as the Philistines from Crete and Cyprus
There
who
it
are
is, the
going to
Philistines.
migrate
Yep.
into Gaza and are going
Yeah,
to worship Dagon as
there it
well,
is. There
because
it
it's the
is.
same people, right?
Same
And it's the
people.
Right,
same religion.
which is where you get the Aryan Brotherhood as well,
Correct.
the
Yes.
14th line of Ishmael and supposed Ishmael.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went on a bit of a rant there, but I
That's
wanted
okay.
to connect a few
No,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
dots.
yeah,
was a
of
good
course. That was good.
interconnection
Of
to show
course.
how it went through the giant lines,
Yes.
beyond Israel, and how
The
they literally were
Philistine.
bringing in the giant lines in their worship.
Jesse, the Dagon Mitra, the head of the fish, the Mitra of a bishop. And like Gary said, they're combining all these religions together to get more people to follow them, more people to listen to them,
Right.
more people to bow down to their doctrine. I'm not a fan of organized religion, to be honest, to be real. Some people go and they say prayers, and if it raises their vibration in a positive way, that's great. But we go back 100 years. The Vatican was burning people at the stake for reading the Bible. That's a fact. That's in the history books.
Yes.
They were burning you if you tried to read the Bible. There's war, there's murder, there's killing, and there's so much that has gone on with all this. So I want to put it out there that nothing, and I mean nothing, is what it seems. I just touched on two things. Let's touch on his scepter. Let's touch on his scepter. Jesse, I'll let you comment on this. Let's see his scepter and the resemblance. Here it
Yeah.
is. Look at this. I'm perplexed. Maybe it's me. It's too much of a coincidence. That, by the way, is Baphomet, which
Yeah.
is the god that they worship, one of them at least, which is half man, half woman, the goat devil god that people usually reach out to in summoning. And on his belt, you could see that right there. And wait a minute, is it me, or does that Pope, that's the Pope, by the way, have the exact same logo on his staff that's in there? Talk to me, Jesse. What's your thoughts on this?
It's like the snake. Absolutely. I would say, it resembles Baphomet, as well as you have the horns of Baal as well on that. And because it has the pomegranate in a certain space, it also represents Ashtaroth and, the fertility goddess. And the one we talked about earlier that has the little spiral at the top, that also, those spirals were put on top of the Ashtaroth poles that they would put in the high places before the altars to Baal and Ashtaroth.
I'm going to add even a little bit more to that and say, and again, this is for another show. I'm touching on it, but that's also somewhat of the logo to represent Enki.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Enki?
I was just going to say.
Oh, Enki.
Gary looks like he knows.
Gary knows what I'm talking. But wait, Gary, not tonight. That's another show. We're going to talk to Enki and Enlil. Who are they? I'm just going to put that out there that is representative of Enki. Who is Enki, and why would that be? And why do we see that logo also on ambulances, hospitals, medical? It also represents the DNA strand.
Boy, that's a big,
Gary, I know you want to touch on it. Go ahead.
that's like a show all in itself.
On its own.
Yeah, but I'll connect a few dots here, and so let's start with. I'm going to work backwards back to Baphomet if I can do this artfully. So Enlil and Enki are the offspring gods of Anu, just as Baal is the offspring god of El. So you have before the flood gods, after the flood gods, and so Enki is also depicted as a serpentine god. As sort of a seraphim god, and he is the god of wisdom, which is a very important. As if I come back to the Egyptian. Well, I'll talk about the Egyptian mystery schools. I mean, their imagery was a serpent as well. The motif for Ta would be a double entwined serpent up a staff, like the staff of Asclepius and the Medical Association.
Correct.
And on that staff there, just while it flashes back up, don't forget about the sun disk that could also be also
Yes.
imagined as the pineal gland. So again, it also
Yes.
has all that
right.
other imagery that's in there. So you have this ancient knowledge of the serpent cult that's related to medical associations, and that's also an dueling serpent is like an image of DNA, right? So, and Enki had similar sort of motifs to represent him in that sort of respect. So if you pull up some, Sumerian reliefs, you're going to see Enki, and you're going to see some of that dueling snake motif as well.
Yes.
So you have this Heliopolis cult, which was the home of the Egyptian Heliopolis and the home of the therapeutate. You know that term in terms of therapeutics. Also to do with the Essenes, and the monastic orders in the Catholic Church are based on the monastic order of the Essenes. So whether or not it's the Franciscans or it's the Cistercians or the Augustines, it doesn't really matter. The Jesuits are all the same ascetic monastic order from the Essenes, who considered themselves part of the therapeutate because they had the religion of Heliopolis. Now, as we sort of move this back into the Pan god, he's a goat god. So Baphomet and Pan are a similar type of god. They're like a degraded seraphim. They are the satyr, a hairy, shaggy watcher. Ayir is the Hebrew word for watcher, as we get that derived out of Daniel 4 times for the word watcher. And so they're degraded down to these lower beings. And you have this god of the Templars, who have that Maltese cross that we were talking about before, who are worshiping this god. So it's like an order of fallen angels shortly after the flood. And so you've also have Cern, that's an Etruscan goat god, and we talked about the Sibylline prophecies. You have lots of different other, I won't go through them all, lots of different goat god names that you could put in there. Cernunnos for another one, which is similar to CERN, which should raise up flags about the CERN project. But you have the Sibylline prophecies that we talked about on Vaticanus Hill and Palatine Hill that comes from Greece, which I had mentioned earlier, which comes from Arcadia, which was home of the Pan god. And so all of this is sort of connecting back to the same ancient Aryan Nephilim, Rephaim religion from before the flood that crosses the flood and is practiced throughout the Mediterranean, that's all been intermixed into the homogenized religion of Constantine and the Roman Church.
Yes. So again, guys, it's important that everyone sees there's hidden symbolism. Nothing is what it seems to be. And there's a lot of occultic, dark imagery. I mean, it's not what you think. And this organized religion wants to dictate to you what to see, what to do, how to do it, when to do it.
Well, and they do it using double entendres, right? So if you look at what they're doing with that mitre, that fish head mitre, they're actually sort of taking that back to as a succession of Peter in terms of the superficial sort of aspect, as the fisherman Peter was, that they're trying to evangelize the world. So, and Francis is particularly good at using allegory and double entendres to communicate out in the open. You just have to understand he's a Jesuit in a secret society and a polytheist to understand that he's talking to a different crew than you are, and he's just using sort of a fairy tale to talk to you on that. And so when we look at no, I'm not going to go down that line. That's a little bit of detail that we probably don't need to go down. But when we're looking at the other imagery that's in there with this snake,
Yes,
is you have this ideology in polytheism that when they dot Jesus as a prophet, that or as an angel, that when he's being talked about in the book of John as being raised up like the serpent or the seraphim in the book of Numbers, that is saying that he is the son of or an angel of Satan, and they're going to use that in the end time. So in the book of Numbers, you had this strange story, sort of after the Exodus, but before the conquests of the land. They've fought one battle with a king of Canaan of that time, Arad, but they're still not totally forged in the commitment and the faith that they're going to need to carry out what they were going on to do. And so they were attacked by these poisonous snakes. And so the people of Israel, they cry out and repent. And so God instructs Moses to create a staff with a serpent's head on top of it. And if they come up and touch that staff, then they're going to be cured. This is not an Nahash serpent, although that's used throughout the story. When it is curing the people as a poisonous serpent, it's the word Seraph Nahash. Mm-hmm. So it is a seraphim angel that is put up on that post. So you use all of that imagery and you go back to the degraded goat god that was a seraphim angel, and everything just sort of blends together in terms of the theology that they're using in taciturn symbols.
And Jessie, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, actually, at the deeper part of that, again, I believe it, going back to even that breastplate, that sign of the serpent on the being raised up, I believe that does represent Jesus. But, we talked about how that everything with that breastplate represented the judgment and the wrath of God. So I believe that, part of that healing that came through that was because it was representing that, he took that full wrath of God, and that included for, the worship of Satan as well as other, false deities, and that there had to be a surrender or acknowledgement of that death of these other things and the acceptance of the life that God would give. So it's interesting. That's one of the most debated passages in Scripture as to, did it really represent the cross, or was it saying that, Jesus was Lucifer? The occultists, go down that road.
Yeah.
No,
they'll twist anything.
They'll twist anything.
Yeah.
100%. I have two. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, he had mentioned something about Astaroth in there as well. And so there's actually in that sort of worship of Astaroth as part of the Baalim, and is the consort of Baal, is that the tiara or mitre of Dagon was always in that bull cult religion, worn over the kippah of Ashtaroth, who's the equivalent of Cybele in what we were talking about, which was a skull cap. So they had a skull cap that was underneath, and then they would wear the Phrygian cap, the conical cap of the fish over top of that in the bull cult of the Baalim. And of course, all of these religions received their authority out of the Baalim and the Council of Gods on Mount Hermon. So
yeah, very interesting.
So guys, I have two more final pictures to share, and we'll just quick. I'll show them quick. We're going to touch on using the occult, twists things to make Jesus look like he's Satan rising. You're correct, and I'm gonna prove that imagery to you in a moment. This is the first one, and it's in my intro video. I'm going to share with everybody. Take a good look at this. This is at the Vatican, ladies and gentlemen. Here's the Pope sitting on his thing, and it to me looks like a bunch of demons. And Lucifer is standing there commanding them, and they're all doing that, or they're maybe attacking that individual that's in the middle. Either way, it seems too dark of an image to be positive and to be in the Vatican. However, I will state for those watching that are not regular viewers, I am not an artist. I don't understand art. I could only understand my own preference. And I believe that this should not be in the Vatican. But that's just me. Gary, we'll go with you. What are your thoughts on this picture?
Yeah, it's an abomination is what it is, and it was designed to sort of, as I understand it, to emote the image of Armageddon, and something worse. I mean, it's full of serpentine, ghastly
Yes.
sort of images
Mhm.
that are in there, and it's also sort of looking almost like a Hades or a Sheol underworld sort of location.
Yes.
Maybe even the lake of fire, what it might
Oh,
be sort of
interesting.
indicating.
Mhm.
But certainly it shows Satan sort of rising out of that imagery is what it
Correct.
is, right? And
Yes.
through, just as Shiva, which would be equivalent of Azazel, who we've talked about as
Mhm.
as the same as Baphomet type of degraded angel, is the destroyer god. And all of those lower gods are always an allegory for the supreme god, as in Satan. And so these destroyer gods like Shiva, again associated with CERN, but another rabbit hole, is they believe in the renewal of the earth that comes with a destruction beforehand. So you have to destroy everything to
Mhm.
renew it. So if you don't think that they mind almost completely destroying the earth to get their way, no,
Yes.
that's just
Correct.
part of their belief system.
Yep.
But and I can't remember of the hall that this is in, but
Mhm.
I do remember the imagery. I can't quite remember the name of it, and you might
Yes,
know it.
there's a
But
name.
the hall that it's in, it's shaped in the head of a cobra.
Correct. Yeah, that's the
Mhm.
meeting place.
Yep.
That is absolutely correct. And the shape of a cobra, going back to the snake once again that we saw where he was holding in his staff. Jesse, thoughts on this photo here?
Yeah, I definitely am in agreement with both of you. I do not believe it's a depiction of Jesus Christ or his victory over death. I believe, again, that it does depict places like Sheol or Hades or,
Mhm.
you know, death and the resurrection of Lucifer. So,
Yeah. Dante's Inferno, somebody said, very similar.
Yes,
I'm
very
going
yeah.
to
similar.
show 1,000%. I'm going to show one more photo.
Yeah.
And this photo, I want to get both your comments on. And it goes back to what Jesse said as they look at, like you said as well, Gary, they turn everything upside down because they're insane.
Mhm.
That's just my take on it. But take a look at this picture. This is, ladies and gentlemen, in a church with a priest, and that is supposedly Jesus with hooves of a goat for feet. Now
Yes,
it could be me, it could be me,
and wings.
and
That's
wings.
and wings. That's not a robe. They're trying to show you the two wings of a goat god.
Oh my gosh,
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. That is wings in the back. It wasn't a robe. It is wings. You're correct. And in the hooves. So there you go. Thoughts? We'll go with you, Gary.
Yeah. So I mean, this is permeates Christianity in so many cases that people have to be aware what about the imageries that are being shown in a church, because there's Masonic imagery everywhere. Not in every church, but in a lot of the churches there's polytheist imagery, and people need to know that that's probably infected the whole church that they're part of. So they do need to be aware of that. And when you look at that word Babylon, that I've talked about and mentioned in relationship to the Phrygian cap, the fish conical cap that the Pope wears, is that Babylon was an allegory for the city of Rome. And so when you look up the word Babylon, when Peter is writing from Babylon, that's an allegory for Rome. But it's also defined in Strong's Concordance not only as the empire and the ancient city, but an allegory for Rome. And it's defined as, in that allegory of Rome, is Rome as the most corrupt seat of idolatry and the enemy of Christianity.
Yeah.
And so they use their imageries to show what they really believe. And for most people, they just sort of accept it. But if people need to be more aware of the how much infiltration there has been into Christianity, and it's designed to lead people away from God and to deceive them, to have them not learn prehistory and not learn prophecy, so that when they bring about the great rendezvous for the destruction of the earth and that renewal that they want to see come out of that, people will be blinded and follow them like sheep, so to speak.
Jessie, your thoughts on this photo?
You know, just the way this one is actually laid out, it's very interesting because it reminds me of since we were just speaking of Dante's Inferno, it reminds me of the pictures of the 9 gates out of the Magica book, and where you've got the different levels and then you've got the gate that has to be passed through. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, one other
And
thing
then,
is,
go
sorry,
ahead.
I just, no, go, you finish. I interrupted. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say too that isn't that the same kind of layout of brickwork that was shown in that picture of the we did the show just a couple weeks ago where the guy claimed that the back of his robe had the image of Mary with the sighting of Mary, and where they have that picture of that robe, the brickwork is the same
Yeah.
where that picture is hanging. So just kind of interesting.
Well, and if you add on to that, you have, that's like the Dark Lord imagery because it's in black, right? And that's
Right.
an allegory for Satan. And Mary, as celebrated by the Jesuits, because Ignatius starts off on his commission to convert the Roman Church to the New Babylon, which is a doctrine of the Templars to do so. They worship the Black Madonna, just as the Knights of St. John, another night order, worship the Black Madonna, right? So the imagery is, I mean, it's idolatry to begin with. And it's polytheist idolatry to boot. So, I mean, it's just piling up on problem after problem with the imagery that is displayed in a lot of Christian churches.
Wow. Action-packed show, guys. I got to say, incredible. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, who's watching and supporting, to our mod Terra. Thank you so much for keeping it all clean. And I'm going to give the floor to Jessie to sign off. And where can people find you and support your ministry?
Definitely. You can find me every week on kingdomlivingwithjessie.com. I have 2 shows on there, Wednesday evening and Sunday evening. And then you can also find me on patreon.com as well as on illuminatethedarkness.com.
Thank you so much. And Gary, where can people find you and support you in all your hard work?
Well, I don't look for support. So I like to do things in a way that all I do is I provide knowledge. But if people want to get a hold of me, you can get a hold of me through my website at the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis 6 with the number 6conspiracy.com. And on that website, you can click on contact the author. So if you wanted some information, I have a document on the MITRE that we were talking about tonight. Just name a topic. If I've got a document, I'll send it to you. If you just have a question, I'll answer that as well. And so it may take me a while to get back to you, but I will get back to you on that. That's the best way to get a hold of me. And if you're interested in my book, and you like what I said, you can find a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters on the website. So you'll get a good feel for you whether or not it's the book for you or not. But I think once you look at the table of contents, it's going to grab your attention. And if you wanted to buy a signed copy, you can click over to the Buy Now page and I will send you a signed copy. Or you can click over to Kindle from the same buy page to get the digital version, or to barnesandnoble.com, or to amazon.com, or amazon.ca. I have a page for Canadians to buy off of. I have a page for the US, and then anywhere else in the world, that's the overseas page. And so lots of ways to get a hold of the book through the website.
Thank you so much, Gary. Guys, once again, I will be posting Jessie's link and Gary's link in the description below. It'll connect you right through to them. So if you want, for me, I am not an author, unfortunately. This is what I do full time. So if you're able to support and keep this show on, I do appreciate it. Go to paypal.me youtube.com/George Iceman. The link is in the description. I thank you all so much. Absolutely incredible to have you here today. Again, anything helps to keep the show on the air right here on YouTube every Friday, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. However, us three are going over the Patreon right now, and we're going to have a special Q&A. So if there are some questions that you wanted to ask Jessie or Gary or myself about anything in the occult or what we've studied or today's topic, it's kind of an open table, a round table, and we allow you guys to come and ask your questions. So please feel free, come on over, join Patreon. The link is in the description. Be a part of the family. We do a show every single Friday. It's called The After Show. Again, I thank you all for watching. Like, subscribe, and share. And in closing, I want to say thank you for watching. God bless. And good night. Anything else, guys, you want to share? Or that's it?
That's great.
That's it? Okay. Thank you again, everybody. Good night.